The blood-red sun dipped below the horizon as Abigail Greyson stumbled along the dusty road leading into Stockton, California. Her swollen eye and split lip telling a story she'd grown weary of living. The year was 1878, and the promise of gold and prosperity that had drawn so many to the West had long since faded for her, leaving nothing but pain and a child growing in her womb. The journey from Sacramento had taken every ounce of strength she possessed. 3 days of walking, hiding, and praying that Vernon Blackburn wouldn't find her before she could disappear. Her meager possessions were bundled in a tattered shawl, and the $4 sewn into the hem of her dress were all that stood between her and starvation. As she approached the outskirts of town, the last light of day caught the weathered sign swinging in front of the town's only hotel. Stockton Lodge, clean beds and hot meals. Abigail touched her bruised face self-consciously, knowing the impression she'd make. A pregnant woman, clearly battered, arriving alone at dusk, but she had no choice. The baby kicked as if in agreement, and she placed a protective hand over her 5-month swell. "You'll be safe soon, little one," she whispered. "I promise." The main street was still busy with evening activity. Men spilled from the saloon doors, their raucous laughter carrying on the warm night air. A group of Chinese workers huddled near the general store, speaking in hushed tones. 2 women in fine dresses hurried past, giving Abigail a wide berth and disapproving glances. She kept her head down as she approached the hotel, praying the proprietor would rent her a room despite her appearance. The stairs to the porch seemed insurmountable in her exhausted state, but she forced her feet forward. As she reached for the door, it swung open suddenly, and Abigail collided with a broad chest. Strong hands steadied her before she could fall backward. "I beg your pardon, madam," came a deep voice. She looked up into the face of a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His brown hair was slightly too long, and a few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. A dusty cowboy hat hung from his fingers, and the star pinned to his vest identified him as the town's sheriff. "Sheriff Jacob Callahan," he introduced himself, his expression shifting from polite to concerned as he took in her injuries. "Are you all right, miss?" Abigail stepped back quickly, lowering her gaze. "Yes, thank you, I'm fine." He didn't move from the doorway. "You don't look fine to me." "You need a doctor." "No," she said too quickly. "I just need a room for the night." Jacob Callahan studied her for a long moment. She could feel his eyes taking in every detail: her bruised face, the way she cradled her belly protectively, the small bundle of possessions. "Mrs. Winters runs this place," he said finally, stepping aside. "She's a good woman. Tell her Jake sent you." Abigail nodded gratefully and slipped past him into the lobby. She felt his eyes on her back as she approached the front desk where a plump, gray-haired woman was writing in a ledger. "Mrs. Winters looked up, her professional smile faltering at the sight of Abigail's face. "Can I help you, dear?" "I need a room," Abigail said quietly. "The sheriff Jake said to tell you he sent me." Understanding dawned in the older woman's eyes. "Of course. How long will you be staying?" "I'm not sure. A few days at least." Abigail pulled out one of her precious dollars. "Will this cover tonight?" Mrs. Winters hesitated, then nodded. "Room 3, top of the stairs. There's a wash basin with fresh water, and I'll have some supper sent up. You look like you could use it." Tears of gratitude stung Abigail's eyes. "Thank you." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand, and a single chair by the window. Abigail set down her bundle and sank onto the bed, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. She hadn't slept properly in days, too afraid Vernon would catch up to her. A soft knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. It was Mrs. Winters with a tray of food, a bowl of stew, a thick slice of bread and a cup of tea. "Eat," the woman said, placing the tray on the small table. "And then rest. You're safe here." Abigail wanted to believe her, but Vernon had connections and money and a temper that wouldn't be satisfied until he found her. Still, she ate gratefully, savoring each bite of the hearty stew before washing her face and crawling under the quilt fully clothed. Despite her fears, sleep claimed her immediately, and she didn't wake until sunlight streamed through the thin curtains the next morning. For a blissful moment, she forgot everything: where she was, why she had run, the danger that surely followed her. Then reality crashed back as she tried to sit up and felt every ache and bruise from Vernon's last attack. She needed work, and quickly. Her meager savings wouldn't last more than a few days, and the baby would come in 4 months. Abigail dressed carefully in the cleanest dress she owned, arranged her hair to look presentable, and went downstairs to ask Mrs. Winters about employment opportunities in Stockton. The hotel lobby was empty except for Sheriff Callahan, who was speaking with Mrs. Winters at the front desk. They both turned as Abigail descended the stairs. "Good morning," Jacob said, his eyes still concerned as they took in her bruises, which looked even worse in the daylight. "How are you feeling today, Miss?" "Greyson," she supplied reluctantly. "Abigail Greyson, and I'm fine, thank you, Sheriff." Mrs. Winters tutted. "You don't look fine, child. The sheriff was just asking about you." Alarm flared through Abigail. "Asking what?" Jacob held up a hand. "Nothing to worry about, just making sure you had everything you needed." She didn't believe him. Men like Sheriff Callahan didn't take special interest in women like her without a reason. "I appreciate your concern, but I can take care of myself." "Never said you couldn't," he replied easily, "but everyone needs help sometimes." Abigail forced herself to meet his gaze directly. "What I need is work. Do you know of anyone hiring in town?" Jacob exchanged a look with Mrs. Winters. "As it happens, my sister Amanda runs the dressmaking shop down the street. She's been looking for someone who can sew." "I can sew," Abigail said quickly, hope flaring. "Very well, in fact. I worked for a dressmaker in Sacramento for 3 years. "Perfect," Jacob nodded. "I'll take you over there after breakfast." "That's not necessary, I insist," he said firmly. "Amanda can be particular about who she hires. My recommendation will help." Abigail reluctantly agreed, knowing he was right. No respectable shopkeeper would hire a pregnant woman with a beaten face without someone vouching for her character, and she couldn't afford to be proud when her child's future depended on finding work. After a simple breakfast of oatmeal and coffee, she followed Jacob down Stockton's Main Street. The town was fully awake now, bustling with morning activity. Wagons rolled past loaded with supplies, shopkeepers swept their storefronts, and children darted between buildings on their way to school. "Stockton's grown a lot in recent years," Jacob remarked as they walked. "Started as just another supply stop for the mines, but now we've got over 4,000 people. The railroad helped." Abigail nodded, not particularly interested in the town's history. Her mind was on the interview ahead and how much of her situation she would need to reveal. "Your sister," she began hesitantly, "will she mind about?" She gestured vaguely to her swollen middle. Jacob's expression softened. "Amanda's not one to judge. She had her own troubles once." Before Abigail could ask what he meant, they arrived at a neat storefront with Callahan Dressmaking painted in elegant script on the window. Through the glass, Abigail could see bolts of fabric in various colors and patterns, and a display of the latest fashions from San Francisco. Jacob held the door for her, and a small bell announced their arrival. A woman emerged from the back room, wiping her hands on her apron. She resembled Jacob, with the same striking blue eyes, though her hair was a shade darker and pulled back in a practical bun. "Jake, I wasn't expecting you this morning." Her smile faltered when she noticed Abigail, her gaze lingering on the bruises. "Who's this?" "Amanda, this is Miss Abigail Greyson. She's new in town and looking for work. Says she has experience as a seamstress." Amanda's expression warmed. "Is that so?" "We're certainly in need of skilled hands. The miners' wives keep me busier than I can manage alone since Martha left to get married." Abigail stepped forward. "I worked for Mrs. Eleanor Pembroke in Sacramento. She taught me everything from basic alterations to creating designs from fashion plates." "Pembroke?" Amanda raised her eyebrows, impressed. "Her work is well known even here. If you trained with her, you must be skilled indeed." Jacob cleared his throat. "I'll leave you ladies to discuss the particulars. Miss Greyson, I'll check in later to see how things worked out." With a tip of his hat, he was gone, the bell jingling in his wake. Amanda gestured toward the back room. "Come sit down, Miss Greyson. You look like you could use a cup of tea and we can talk properly." The workspace behind the shop was warm and inviting, with a large table for cutting fabric, 2 sewing machines, and comfortable chairs near a small stove. Amanda busied herself making tea while Abigail sat awkwardly, wondering how to address her pregnancy. "How far along are you?" Amanda asked matter-of-factly, handing her a steaming cup. Abigail nearly spilled the tea. "About 5 months." Amanda nodded. "And I'm guessing the father is the one responsible for those bruises." The directness of the question made Abigail's throat tighten. She could only nod. "Did you leave him?" "Yes," Abigail whispered. 3 days ago. He doesn't know where I am." Amanda studied her for a long moment. "Good. No woman deserves that, especially not one carrying a child." She took a sip of her tea. "I can offer you $3 a week to start, with a raise to 4 if your work proves as good as you claim. Hours are 8 till 6, with Sundays off." Abigail could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You're offering me the position, just like that? I need help, you need work. And any woman brave enough to leave a bad situation deserves a chance." Amanda set down her cup. "When can you start?" "Immediately," Abigail said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Miss Callahan. You won't regret it." "Amanda, please. And I'll need to see your stitching before I'm sure about not regretting it." But her smile was kind. "Let's have you finish a piece I've been working on and we'll go from there." By the end of the day, Abigail had proven her skill with needle and thread, completing the fine detail work on a wedding dress that had Amanda nodding in approval. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of hope. With steady work, she might be able to afford a small room of her own, somewhere to raise her child away from Vernon's rage. As she walked back to the hotel in the fading light, her steps were lighter despite her exhaustion. She barely noticed Sheriff Callahan until he fell into step beside her. "I take it things went well with Amanda," he said. Abigail nodded. "She offered me the position. I start tomorrow properly." "Glad to hear it." He studied her profile. "You know, Miss Greyson, Stockton's a small town. People will talk about a woman in your situation." Her defenses rose immediately. "I'm aware. What I mean is," he continued carefully, "if someone's looking for you, word might get back." Abigail stopped walking, fear clutching at her throat. "Did someone come asking?" "No," Jacob assured her quickly. "Not yet. But I've seen enough cases like yours to know how they usually go." "And how is that?" she asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. His eyes were gentle but serious. "The man comes looking, claims his wife is confused, ill, needs to come home. People believe him because he's charming, well-dressed, respected, and the woman ends up back where she started or worse." Abigail wrapped her arms protectively around her middle. "I'm not going back. Ever." "Good," Jacob nodded. "But you should know I'm here to help if you need it. And not just because it's my job." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. How long had it been since someone had offered her help without expecting something in return? "Why do you care?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. Jacob's expression turned distant for a moment. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when no one steps in to help." He cleared his throat. "Anyway, I'm glad Amanda took you on. She's a fair employer." They had reached the hotel, and Abigail paused at the bottom of the steps. "Thank you for your help today, Sheriff." "I appreciate it more than I can say." "Jake," he corrected with a small smile, "and you're welcome, Miss Greyson." "Abigail," she offered, surprising herself. His smile widened, transforming his face. "Abigail, sleep well." As she watched him walk away, Abigail felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through her chest. It had been so long since anyone had shown her basic kindness that she hardly knew how to respond to it. And yet, she couldn't afford to trust too easily, not when Vernon could appear at any moment to drag her back to Sacramento and the living hell she'd escaped. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm of work and cautious settling in. Abigail's skill as a seamstress quickly earned Amanda's respect, and the bruises on her face faded, making it easier to interact with customers without drawing pitying stares. With her first paycheck, she rented a small room above the bakery, barely more than a closet with a bed and washstand, but it was hers. Each night, she pushed a chair against the door, a habit born from years of fearing Vernon's drunken rages. Jacob Callahan made a point of checking on her regularly, stopping by the dressmaker's shop or tipping his hat when they passed on the street. Sometimes, he brought her a fresh apple from the orchard outside town, or insisted on walking her home when she worked late. Always polite, always respectful, but Abigail couldn't help noticing the way his eyes followed her, or how his smile seemed to brighten when she entered a room. It was dangerous, she knew, to let herself feel anything for the kind sheriff. Vernon had seemed kind once too, in the beginning. Besides, what decent man would want a woman carrying another man's child? One evening in late July, as Abigail was closing up the shop alone, Amanda had gone home early with a headache. The bell above the door jingled. She looked up with a polite smile that froze on her face. A man stood in the doorway, tall and expensively dressed, his dark hair slicked back with pomade. Though he wasn't Vernon, something about his calculating gaze sent a chill down her spine. "I'm sorry, sir, we're closing," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He smiled, showing too many teeth. "I'm not here to shop, Miss Greyson, or should I say Mrs. Blackburn." Abigail's blood turned to ice. She gripped the counter to stay upright. "Who are you?" "Edward Klein. I work for your husband." He stepped further into the shop. "Mr. Blackburn is quite concerned about you and the child. He sent me to bring you home." "I don't have a husband," Abigail said through clenched teeth, "and I'm not going anywhere with you." Klein's smile didn't waver. "Vernon thought you might say that. He asked me to remind you that abandoning one's husband is both a sin and a crime. The authorities in Sacramento have been very understanding of his plight, a man whose pregnant wife has run off with his money." "That's a lie. I didn't take anything that wasn't mine." "Your word against his, I'm afraid, and who do you think they'll believe? A respected businessman or a hysterical woman?" Abigail's hand moved to the scissors on the counter beside her. "Get out." Klein noticed the movement and laughed. Now, there's no need for that. Vernon doesn't want any harm to come to his child." His eyes hardened. "But he was quite clear that if you don't return willingly, things will be unpleasant for you and anyone who's been helping you." The threat hung in the air like poison. Abigail thought of Amanda, who had given her a chance when she needed it most, and Jacob, whose kindness had been a lifeline. "I need time," she said, buying herself a moment to think. "You have until tomorrow noon," Klein replied. "I'll be at the hotel. Come to me there, packed and ready to travel." He tipped his hat in mocking civility. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Mrs. Blackburn." After he left, Abigail sank to the floor, her legs no longer able to support her. Vernon had found her. It was only a matter of time before he came himself, and when he did, she didn't realize she was sobbing until the shop door opened again and Jacob rushed to her side. "Abigail, what happened?" He crouched beside her, his hands hovering as if afraid to touch her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak through her tears. Jacob's jaw tightened as he took in her terrified state. "Was it him? Your husband?" "How did you? Amanda told me some of it," he admitted. "Was he here?" "No," Abigail managed. "Someone he sent. A man named Klein." Jacob helped her to a chair, his touch gentle. "Tell me everything." Between shuddering breaths, Abigail explained about Klein's visit and his threats. Jacob listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker. "He said I have until noon tomorrow," she finished. "If I don't go with him willingly, Vernon will come himself, and he'll hurt anyone who's helped me." "You're not going anywhere with him," Jacob said firmly. "I don't have a choice. You don't know Vernon. He won't stop until he gets what he wants." "And what about what you want?" Jacob's blue eyes were intense. "What about your safety, your child's safety?" Abigail placed a protective hand over her growing belly. "That's why I ran. Vernon. The last time he hit me, I fell. I was so afraid I'd lose the baby." Jacob's expression hardened. "I won't let him near you, Abigail. I promise you that." "You can't stop him," she whispered. "He has money connections. And technically, as my husband, he has the right to—" "No man has the right to hurt his wife," Jacob interrupted, his voice fierce. "I don't care what the law says about a husband's authority. Some things are just plain wrong." His conviction shook her. For years, Vernon had convinced her that his violence was justified, that she deserved it somehow. To hear someone, especially a lawman, say otherwise was like rain on parched earth. "What can I do?" she asked, desperation edging her voice. Jacob was quiet for a moment, thinking. "First, you're not spending tonight alone. You'll stay at Amanda's house. It's on the edge of town, less obvious than your room or the hotel. I'll post a deputy outside just in case. And tomorrow I'll deal with Mr. Klein." His expression was grim. "Don't worry, I won't do anything illegal, but I can make it clear that he's not welcome in Stockton." Abigail wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that someone could stand up to Vernon and win, but years of abuse had taught her to expect the worst. "What if he comes anyway? What if he brings the law from Sacramento?" Jacob took her hands in his touch warm and reassuring. "Abigail, look at me. I'm the law in Stockton. And I promise you, as long as I'm sheriff, no one is going to force you to go anywhere against your will." Something in his fierce determination made her believe him, at least enough to let him help her close the shop and escort her to Amanda's cozy house on Pine Street. Amanda welcomed her without question, setting her up in a spare bedroom with a cup of chamomile tea. The two women stayed up late talking, and for the first time, Abigail shared the full story of her marriage to Vernon Blackburn. She told Amanda how she'd been just 19, working as a seamstress in San Francisco, when Vernon had swept her off her feet. Handsome, charming, and seemingly kind, he'd promised her a life of comfort and respect. For the first few months, he'd kept that promise. Then came the first slap after she'd burnt his dinner. He'd apologized profusely, blamed it on stress from work, bought her flowers the next day. She'd forgiven him, but the incidents increased in frequency and severity. A slap became a punch. Apologies became accusations that she had provoked him. By the time they moved to Sacramento for Vernon's business ventures, Abigail was a shadow of her former self, isolated from friends and family, afraid of saying or doing anything that might trigger his rage. "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Amanda asked gently. Abigail stared into her tea. He threatened to kill me if I tried, and I believed him, but when I found out I was with child—" She looked up, her eyes haunted. "I couldn't let my baby grow up seeing what he did to me, or worse, have him do the same to my child." Amanda squeezed her hand. "You did the right thing leaving. And Jake won't let anything happen to you or your baby." "Why does he care so much?" Abigail asked, the question that had been nagging at her for weeks. A sad smile touched Amanda's lips. "Our mother, our stepfather wasn't a kind man. Jake was too young to stop it then. I think he spent his life trying to make up for that." The revelation gave Abigail a new understanding of the sheriff's fierce protectiveness. It wasn't pity that drove him, but a deep, personal understanding of the terror she'd lived with. That night, despite the comfortable bed and Amanda's reassurances, Abigail barely slept. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind had her sitting up in alarm, certain that Vernon had found her. Morning came too quickly. Amanda insisted she eat breakfast, though Abigail's stomach was too knotted with fear to manage more than a few bites of toast. As the clock inched toward noon, her anxiety reached a fever pitch. "I should go," she said suddenly, standing. "I'm putting you and Jacob in danger by staying." Amanda blocked her path. "You're not going anywhere. Jake knows what he's doing." As if summoned by his name, there was a knock at the door. Amanda answered it to find Jacob standing on the porch, his expression grim but determined. "Is Klein gone?" Abigail asked as soon as he stepped inside. "He left on the morning stage," Jacob confirmed, "but I don't think that's the end of it." Her heart sank. "What did he say?" "Not much to me directly, but I overheard him sending a telegram to Sacramento before he left." Jacob removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I think your husband will be coming himself." Abigail sank back into her chair, defeat washing over her. "Then it's over. I can't run again, not like this." She gestured to her swollen belly. "And I can't ask you to risk yourselves for me." "You're not asking. We're offering," Amanda said firmly. Jacob nodded. "Vernon Blackburn isn't the first bully I've dealt with, and he won't be the last." "You don't understand," Abigail said, frustration rising. "Vernon isn't just any man. He has money, influence. People listen to him, believe him." "People here listen to me," Jacob countered. "I've been sheriff of Stockton for 8 years. Folks trust my judgment." "And what exactly is your plan when he arrives?" Abigail demanded. "You can't arrest him for coming to find his wife." Jacob's expression was steady. "No, but I can make sure he knows that you're under my protection. That any attempt to force you to leave will be met with resistance. And if he brings a court order, or claims I'm mentally unfit like he's done before, then we'll fight it." Jacob knelt in front of her chair, his eyes earnest. "Abigail, I know you've learned not to trust anyone. Vernon taught you that, but I'm asking you to trust me now." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. "Why? Why would you do this for me?" For a moment, Jacob seemed at a loss for words. Then, quietly, he admitted, "Because I care about you, more than I should, probably." The simple confession hung in the air between them. Abigail searched his face for any sign of deceit, but found only sincerity and something else, a warmth that made her cheeks flush. Amanda cleared her throat. "I'll put on some coffee," she said, tactfully retreating to the kitchen. Left alone, Abigail found herself unable to meet Jacob's eyes. "You shouldn't care about me. It's complicated." "Life usually is," he said with a small smile. "But some things are simple, like knowing right from wrong, helping someone who needs it. Caring about someone even when it's inconvenient." His hand found hers and she didn't pull away. "I'm carrying another man's child," she said, the words a challenge and a test. "I know, a man who beat me, who might still come for me." Jacob's fingers tightened around hers. "Not anymore." The simple phrase, a promise, and a declaration, broke something loose inside Abigail. Tears spilled down her cheeks as years of fear and loneliness crashed over her. Jacob didn't try to stop her tears or offer empty platitudes. He simply held her hand and let her cry, a steady presence in the storm of her emotions. When she finally quieted, he spoke again, his voice gentle but firm. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to stay with Amanda until we know it's safe. I'll have deputies watching the stage and train station for Vernon's arrival. And when he comes," Abigail asked, wiping her eyes, "when he comes, I'll meet with him, man to man, and I'll make it very clear that his presence isn't welcome in Stockton. He won't listen. Then I'll make him listen." The steel in Jacob's voice was unmistakable. "One way or another, he'll understand that you're not going back with him." For the first time since fleeing Sacramento, Abigail allowed herself to hope not just for temporary safety, but for a future free from fear. The waiting was the hardest part. 3 days passed with no sign of Vernon, each hour stretching Abigail's nerves tighter. She stayed at Amanda's house, working on sewing projects to keep her hands busy while her mind raced through all the possible scenarios of Vernon's arrival. On the 4th day, the stage from Sacramento rolled into town right on schedule. Jacob watched from across the street as the passengers disembarked, a family with 3 children, an elderly couple, and finally, a well-dressed man with dark hair and a bearing that spoke of wealth and confidence. Vernon Blackburn had arrived. Jacob observed him carefully as he collected his luggage and surveyed the town with obvious disdain. Vernon was handsome in a conventional way, with sharp features and expensive clothes. But there was something cold in his eyes that set Jacob's teeth on edge. He watched as Vernon checked into the hotel, then headed to the saloon. Jacob waited an hour before following him in, taking a seat at the bar while Vernon played cards with some locals. It didn't take long for Vernon to notice him. The sheriff's badge wasn't exactly subtle. Their eyes met across the smoky room, and Jacob saw the flicker of recognition. Vernon had been told who he was. Vernon excused himself from the card game and approached the bar, taking the stool next to Jacob. "Sheriff Callahan," he said smoothly, offering his hand. "Vernon Blackburn. I believe you've met my associate, Mr. Klein." Jacob shook the hand briefly. "I have. He mentioned you might be coming to town." Vernon signaled the bartender for a drink. "I'm looking for my wife, Abigail. She's in a delicate condition, left home in a state of confusion. Her doctor says it's not uncommon for women in her condition to become irrational." "Is that so?" Jacob kept his tone neutral. "Indeed, I'm quite concerned for her welfare." Vernon sipped his whiskey. "I've reason to believe she's in Stockton. Have you seen her?" Jacob turned to face him fully. "Mr. Blackburn, let's not waste each other's time. I know why your wife left you. I've seen the bruises." Vernon's pleasant expression didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. "My wife is prone to accidents when she's in these states. Falls, bumps into things. As I said, she's not well. Funny how those accidents always seem to leave marks in the shape of a man's fist," Jacob remarked. The facade cracked slightly as anger flashed across Vernon's face. "I don't appreciate what you're implying, Sheriff." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Abigail left you because you beat her. She's afraid you'll hurt the child, and she's not going back with you." Vernon set his glass down with deliberate care. "My wife's whereabouts are none of your concern, Sheriff. This is a private family matter. It became my concern when she sought refuge in my town." "So you admit you know where she is?" Vernon's smile was cold. "I'd like to see her now." Jacob shook his head. "That's not going to happen." Vernon leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Listen carefully, Sheriff. Abigail is my wife. The law gives me certain rights over her and my unborn child. If you're interfering with those rights, you could find yourself in serious trouble." "Is that a threat?" Jacob asked mildly. "A statement of fact. I have friends in Sacramento, influential friends. One telegram and you could find yourself without that badge. Jacob didn't blink. Send all the telegrams you want. In Stockton, I'm the law, and I'm telling you now that Abigail is under my protection. Vernon's mask slipped further, rage bubbling just beneath the surface. You have no right. I have every right to protect the citizens of this town from harm, Jacob interrupted. And make no mistake, Mr. Blackburn, if you try to force Abigail to leave, or if you so much as touch her, I will personally ensure you regret it. The two men stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Vernon stood, straightening his jacket. This isn't over, Sheriff. Not by a long shot. Jacob watched him leave, then downed the rest of his drink in one swallow. The confrontation had gone about as expected. Vernon was exactly the type of man he'd imagined. All smooth charm on the surface and cold calculation underneath. The type who believed his wealth gave him the right to do as he pleased. The type of man Jacob despised most. He paid for his drink and headed straight to Amanda's house to warn them that Vernon had arrived. Abigail turned deathly pale at the news. "What did he say?" she asked, one hand unconsciously moving to protect her belly. Jacob relayed the conversation, softening some of Vernon's more threatening statements. "He knows you're in town, but he doesn't know where exactly. We need to be careful." "What do we do now?" Amanda asked, looking between her brother and Abigail. "Now we wait," Jacob said grimly. Vernon won't leave easily, but he can't force Abigail to go with him without causing a scene, and he's too concerned with appearances to risk that. Abigail wasn't convinced. "You don't know him like I do. If he can't charm or threaten his way to what he wants, he'll find another way. He always does." That night, Jacob insisted on staying at Amanda's house, sleeping in a chair by the front door with his gun within easy reach. Vernon might be calculating enough to wait for the right moment, but Jacob wasn't taking any chances. His vigilance proved necessary shortly after midnight, when a noise outside the house brought him instantly alert. Jacob moved silently to the window and peered out. A dark figure was attempting to force the back door. Drawing his gun, Jacob slipped outside through the front and circled around the house. The intruder not Vernon himself, but a burly man Jacob recognized as one of the drifters who'd arrived on the same stage, was still working on the door lock. "That's far enough," Jacob said quietly, pressing his gun against the man's back. "Hands where I can see them." The man froze. "I ain't done nothing wrong, Sheriff." "Breaking and entering is enough to earn you a night in my jail," Jacob replied. "Who sent you?" "Blackburn." The man's silence was answer enough. Jacob marched him around to the front of the house, where Amanda stood in the doorway with a lamp, Abigail behind her. "Jake, what happened?" Amanda asked. "Mr. Blackburn's trying to get creative," Jacob said. "This fellow was trying to break in the back way." The man spat on the ground. "Just following orders. Blackburn said get the woman, didn't say nothing about tangling with no sheriff." Abigail stepped forward, her face white in the lamplight. "Did he tell you to hurt me?" The man avoided her eyes. "Said bring you to the hotel, didn't say how." Jacob's grip on the man's collar tightened. "You're spending the night in jail, and in the morning you're getting on the first stage out of town. If I see you in Stockton again, you won't like what happens." After locking up his prisoner, Jacob returned to Amanda's house, his expression thunderous. "This changes things," he told Abigail. "Vernon's proven he won't play by the rules. We need to be more careful." "What can we do?" Abigail asked, her voice small. "He won't stop." Jacob paced the small sitting room. "We need to find a more secure place for you to stay, and we need to find a way to make Vernon give up for good." "There's only one thing that would make him leave," Abigail said quietly, "if he believed I was no longer his wife." Jacob stopped pacing. "What do you mean, in the eyes of the law I belong to Vernon?" Her voice was bitter. Unless. Unless what? Amanda prompted. Abigail took a deep breath. Unless I belonged to someone else, someone Vernon would be afraid to challenge. The room fell silent as her meaning sank in. Jacob stared at her, shock evident on his face. Abigail, are you suggesting marriage? She said simply. It's the only legal protection that would counter his claim on me. Amanda looked between them, her expression thoughtful. She's right, Jake. As her husband, Vernon has all the legal rights, but if she were to marry again— That's bigamy, Jacob protested. It wouldn't be legal. Not if I claimed we were never properly married, Abigail countered. Vernon arranged everything. I never saw the actual license. For all I know, he might have falsified it. Jacob shook his head. It's too risky, and who would you even? His voice trailed off as Abigail's gaze met his, steady and challenging. The implication hung in the air between them. Me, he finally managed. You want to marry me? It would be a marriage of convenience, Abigail said quickly, her cheeks flushing. Just until Vernon gives up and leaves. Then we could have it annulled. Jacob ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts in turmoil. Abigail, I don't think it's just a suggestion, she interrupted, looking away. Forget I mentioned it. Amanda cleared her throat. It's late and we're all tired. Let's get some rest and discuss this in the morning with clear heads. But sleep eluded Jacob that night as he sat in the chair by the door, his mind turning over Abigail's suggestion. Marriage. Even a temporary one, a sham to fool Vernon, it wasn't something he took lightly. And yet, there was a part of him, a growing part, that didn't hate the idea at all. Since Abigail had arrived in Stockton, she had awakened feelings in him he'd thought long buried. Her courage in the face of adversity, her determination to protect her unborn child, even her vulnerability, all of it had drawn him to her in a way he hadn't expected. But to marry her now, under these circumstances, it felt like taking advantage, even if it was her idea. Morning came with no clear answer, but one thing Jacob knew for certain: he would do whatever was necessary to keep Abigail safe from Vernon Blackburn. After breakfast, as the three of them discussed options, there was a knock at the door. Jacob answered it to find his deputy, young Tom Wilson, looking worried. Sheriff, there's trouble. Blackburn's at the hotel making a scene. Says his wife's been kidnapped, demanding we form a search party. Jacob swore under his breath. He's trying to force my hand. That's not all, Tom continued. He's got papers, legal documents from Sacramento saying he has guardianship over his wife due to her unstable mental state. Abigail made a strangled sound behind him. I knew he would do this. He's having me declared insane. Jacob's jaw tightened. Tom, tell Blackburn I'll meet him at my office in 1 hour, and send for Judge Porter. I want him there too. After the deputy left, Jacob turned to Abigail. We're out of time for half measures, if you're still certain about this plan. I am, she said firmly. It's the only way. Jacob took her hands in his. Then let's do this properly. Abigail Greyson, will you marry me? Not just to thwart Vernon, but because I care for you and I want to protect you and your child. Tears filled her eyes. Yes, she whispered. But Jacob, you have to understand, I'm not sure I can ever be a proper wife. After Vernon, the thought of intimacy. We'll take things as slowly as you need, he assured her. This is about your safety first. Everything else can wait. Amanda, who had been watching with suspiciously bright eyes, clapped her hands. Well then, we have a wedding to arrange, and quickly. An hour later, in the small church on Main Street, Abigail stood beside Jacob before Reverend Miller. Amanda and Tom Wilson served as witnesses. There was no time for a proper dress or flowers, but Abigail had washed her hair and borrowed a blue shawl from Amanda, something borrowed, something blue in one. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. Jacob's hands were steady as he placed a simple gold ring, his mother's. Amanda had tearfully insisted he take it on Abigail's finger. When Reverend Miller pronounced them man and wife, Jacob's kiss was gentle, barely more than a brush of his lips against hers, respectful of her fears. But even that brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through Abigail. For the first time in years, a man's touch didn't make her flinch. They went directly from the church to the sheriff's office, where Vernon was waiting, his face a mask of controlled rage. Judge Porter, a grave man in his 60s with shrewd eyes, sat behind Jacob's desk. Vernon rose as they entered. "Abigail, thank God, I've been worried sick." He moved toward her, but Jacob stepped between them. "That's close enough, Blackburn." Vernon's eyes narrowed as he took in their proximity, the way Jacob's hand rested protectively at Abigail's waist. His gaze fell to the ring on her finger, and his expression darkened. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Judge Porter cleared his throat. "I believe I can answer that, Mr. Blackburn. I've just received word that Sheriff Callahan and Miss Greyson were married this morning by Reverend Miller with proper witnesses." "Impossible," Vernon spat. "She's already married, to me." "That's not what the lady claims," the judge replied mildly. "According to Mrs. Callahan, your marriage was never properly registered. She has sworn a statement to that effect." "This is absurd. I have papers." Vernon pulled documents from his jacket. "Forgeries, most likely," Jacob interrupted. "Abigail has never been legally declared mentally unfit by any doctor in California." Vernon's controlled facade cracked. "She's my wife. That's my child she's carrying." "The child, yes," Jacob acknowledged, his voice hard. "But Abigail is my wife now. And if you want any hope of ever seeing your child, you'll conduct yourself as a gentleman from this point forward." Judge Porter stood. "Sheriff Callahan is right, Mr. Blackburn. Whatever your claims, this is now a legal matter that will take time to resolve. In the meantime, I see no reason to doubt the validity of this morning's marriage." Vernon looked from the judge to Jacob to Abigail, who met his gaze without flinching for the first time in years. Something in her steady look must have convinced him that this battle was lost, at least temporarily. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "That's my child, and I will have my rights." "You'll have whatever rights the court decides to give you," Jacob replied evenly. "Until then, I suggest you return to Sacramento. We'll contact you when the baby is born." Vernon's hand twitched as if he wanted to strike someone, but with the judge watching, he controlled himself. With a final venomous look at Abigail, he stormed out of the office. The tension in the room dissipated like smoke. Judge Porter sighed heavily. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jake. Blackburn isn't the type to give up easily." "I know," Jacob replied, "but it bought us time." "And what happens when the child is born?" the judge asked. "Blackburn will have rights as the father." Abigail stepped forward. "By then, I hope to prove he's unfit. I have evidence of his treatment of me, and witnesses in Sacramento who saw the aftermath, even if they were too afraid of him to speak up before." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "It won't be easy, but it's not impossible. The courts are beginning to take a dimmer view of men who abuse their wives." He gathered his hat and cane. "Keep documenting everything, and be careful. Men like Blackburn are most dangerous when they're cornered." After he left, Abigail sagged against Jacob, the events of the morning catching up with her. "Do you think he'll really leave?" "For now," Jacob said, helping her to a chair. "But the judge is right, this isn't over yet." Their marriage, begun as a tactical move in the chess game against Vernon, now presented a new challenge: how to live together as husband and wife in name only. Jacob insisted Abigail move into his house, a modest but comfortable 2-bedroom home near the sheriff's office. "The spare room is yours," he told her. "I'll sleep downstairs." Despite her protests that she could continue working at Amanda's shop, Jacob was firm. Vernon might be gone from town, but I wouldn't put it past him to have hired eyes watching. You'll be safer here, where I can protect you. The first few days of their arranged marriage were awkward, both of them overly polite, careful not to invade each other's space. Jacob left for work each morning and returned each evening to find Abigail had prepared dinner, the house tidier than it had been in years. They ate together, making stilted conversation, before Jacob retired to the small study that now served as his bedroom. But gradually, the awkwardness began to fade. They established routines, found common interests in books and music. Jacob discovered that Abigail had a dry wit that emerged when she felt safe, and she found that, beneath his serious exterior, he was surprisingly gentle and thoughtful. 2 weeks after their hasty wedding, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Abigail felt her baby kick particularly hard. Without thinking, she grabbed Jacob's hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel that?" she asked with a smile. "He's been active all day." Jacob's eyes widened at the movement beneath his palm. "That's amazing," he said softly. Then, realizing the intimacy of the moment, he started to pull his hand away. Abigail kept it in place. "It's all right. I don't mind." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, an acknowledgement that perhaps this marriage of convenience was becoming something more. That night, as Jacob lay on the narrow sofa in his study, staring at the ceiling, he admitted to himself what he had been trying to deny. He was falling in love with his wife. Not just protective concern, not just admiration for her courage, but something deeper and more complex. The realization should have troubled him. Their arrangement was temporary, a shield against Vernon until the baby was born and legal matters settled. Abigail had made it clear she wasn't ready for a real marriage, might never be after what Vernon had done to her. And yet, as Jacob drifted off to sleep, he found himself hoping that somehow, someday, she might come to see him as more than her protector. Abigail, meanwhile, lay awake in the bedroom upstairs, her thoughts in similar turmoil. Living with Jacob, these past weeks had shown her a kind of man she'd never known existed: patient, respectful, attentive without being possessive. He never raised his voice, never used his strength to intimidate, never made her feel less than equal. It was disorienting, after years with Vernon, to live without constant fear. Even more disorienting was the warmth that spread through her when Jacob smiled at her, or the disappointment she felt on days when his duties kept him away longer than usual. Was it possible to love again after everything? To trust a man with not just her safety but her heart? The baby kicked, as if in answer, and Abigail smiled in the darkness. Whatever happened between her and Jacob, her child would grow up in a home without fear. That certainty gave her peace enough to finally sleep. August turned to September, and Abigail's pregnancy advanced. Jacob insisted on accompanying her to her appointments with Dr. Hayes, the town physician, who pronounced both mother and baby healthy despite the stress of recent months. "You're due in late November by my calculation," the doctor told her, "just in time for Thanksgiving." Vernon remained in Sacramento, but his presence loomed over them like a storm cloud on the horizon. Jacob received occasional inquiries from lawyers representing Mr. Blackburn's interests, all of which he directed to Judge Porter. The judge, true to his word, was helping them build a case against Vernon's claims of guardianship. One crisp October morning, as golden leaves swirled down Main Street, Abigail was helping Amanda in the dress shop when a familiar face appeared in the doorway. Edward Klein, Vernon's associate, stood there with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Callahan, you're looking well." Abigail's hand stilled on the fabric she was cutting. "What do you want, Mr. Klein?" He stepped inside, removing his hat. "Just delivering a message from Vernon. He wants to know if you've reconsidered his generous offer." "What offer?" Amanda asked sharply. Klein's smile widened. "Vernon is prepared to let bygones be bygones. He'll drop all legal challenges to your arrangement with the sheriff in exchange for sole custody of the child after it's born." Abigail felt the blood drain from her face. "Get out. Think carefully, Mrs. Callahan. Vernon is a powerful man. He can provide for the child in ways you and your sheriff never could. The best schools, the finest opportunities. I said get out." Abigail grabbed a pair of scissors from the table, her hands shaking. "Tell Vernon he'll never touch my child." "Never," Klein shrugged, unperturbed. "He thought you might say that, but he wanted me to remind you that even temporary husbands can have accidents, especially in a dangerous profession like law enforcement." The threat hung in the air like poison. Amanda moved swiftly to the door, opening it wide. "Leave now, Mr. Klein, or I'll call my brother to remove you personally." After he left, Abigail collapsed into a chair, her hands protectively cradling her swollen belly. "He's threatening Jacob," she whispered. "Vernon will kill him to get to me." Amanda knelt beside her. "Jake can take care of himself, but we should tell him about this visit right away." They found Jacob at his office, reviewing wanted posters with his deputy. One look at Abigail's face told him something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, guiding her to a chair. Abigail recounted Klein's visit and his thinly veiled threat. Jacob's expression hardened with each word. "That tears it," he said when she finished. "Threatening an officer of the law is a crime. I'm going to find Klein and throw him in jail until the next stage leaves." "No," Abigail caught his arm. "That's what Vernon wants, to provoke you into doing something rash. Please, Jacob, be careful." He covered her hand with his touch gentle despite his anger. "I will, but I'm not letting Klein or Vernon terrorize you, not anymore." That evening, after a quiet dinner, Abigail found Jacob on the porch, staring into the darkness with troubled eyes. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, joining him on the swing. "Vernon," he admitted. "Men like him don't give up easily, and they don't play fair." Abigail nodded. "I know. That's why I've been afraid for so long." Jacob turned to face her. "I don't want you to be afraid anymore, Abigail. I want you to be happy, you and the baby." "I am happy," she said softly. "Here with you, happier than I've been in years." Something in her voice made Jacob's breath catch. "Even though this isn't a real marriage, even though is that what you think?" Abigail interrupted. "That this isn't real, we agreed it was temporary, an arrangement to protect you from Vernon." Abigail looked down at her hands, at the gold ring that had been his mother's. "What if I don't want it to be temporary anymore?" Jacob went very still. "Abigail, what are you saying?" She gathered her courage and met his eyes. "I'm saying that I care for you, Jacob. That these past months have shown me what a marriage should be built on: respect and kindness, not fear and control. And you want that, with me." His voice was carefully measured, as if afraid to hope. "I do." The words were simple but profound, an echo of their wedding vows, spoken this time not from desperation but from choice. "But I need to know if you want it too, if you can accept another man's child as your own." Jacob took her hands in his. "Abigail, I've been falling in love with you since the day you arrived in Stockton. And that child," he placed a gentle hand on her belly, "as far as I'm concerned, that's my child too, if you'll let me be a father to him or her." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes. "Even though Vernon will always be in our lives somehow, always be a threat, we'll face him together," Jacob promised. "And we'll win, not just in court but in giving your child a home filled with love instead of fear." Abigail leaned forward then, closing the distance between them, and kissed him, their first real kiss, initiated by her, without fear or hesitation. Jacob responded with gentle passion, his arms encircling her carefully. When they finally parted, breathless, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Abigail Callahan." The name, her new name, freely chosen this time, made her smile through her tears. "And I love you, Jacob Callahan." That night, they slept in the same bed for the first time, just sleeping. Jacob holding her as if she were made of glass, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For Abigail, it was another step in reclaiming what Vernon had stolen from her, the ability to be close to a man without fear, to accept tenderness without expecting pain to follow. The weeks passed in a new harmony, their pretend marriage gradually transforming into a real one. Jacob continued to be patient, never pushing Abigail beyond what she was comfortable with, but each day brought new intimacies, a lingering touch, a deeper kiss, the growing confidence that love didn't have to hurt. As November arrived and Abigail's due date approached, they made preparations for the baby. Jacob spent evenings crafting a cradle from oak, while Abigail sewed tiny clothes and blankets. Amanda hosted a small gathering of the town's women, who brought gifts and advice for the mother-to-be. But the shadow of Vernon Blackburn still hung over their happiness. Jacob increased patrols around their home, and Abigail never went anywhere alone, always accompanied by either Jacob, Amanda, or Deputy Wilson. Their vigilance proved necessary on a cold November morning, just 2 weeks before Abigail's due date. She was at home alone. Jacob had been called away to deal with a disturbance at the saloon when she heard the back door open. Thinking it was Jacob returning, she called out, "You're home early." There was no response, just the sound of footsteps in the kitchen. Something about the quality of the silence sent a chill through Abigail. She rose from her sewing, one hand supporting her heavily pregnant belly, and moved toward the bedroom door. Before she could reach it, the door swung open to reveal Vernon Blackburn. Abigail stumbled backward, a scream rising in her throat. Vernon closed the distance between them with 2 quick strides and clamped a hand over her mouth. "Hello, Abigail," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "Did you miss me?" Fear froze her in place, memories of past beatings paralyzing her as effectively as any restraints. Vernon's familiar cologne, sandalwood, and cigars brought back the terror of their marriage in a dizzying rush. "I've been watching the house," he continued, removing his hand from her mouth but keeping a firm grip on her arm. "Waiting for the sheriff to leave. We have unfinished business, you and I." Finding her voice at last, Abigail said, "Jacob will be back any minute." Vernon laughed. "No, he won't. That disturbance at the saloon, a little diversion arranged by my associates. He'll be tied up for quite some time." "What do you want, Vernon?" Abigail asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "What's rightfully mine?" His gaze dropped to her belly. "My child and my wife." "I'm not your wife anymore." His grip tightened painfully. "A technicality I plan to rectify. We're leaving Stockton today, Abigail, going somewhere your sheriff won't find us." Panic surged through her. "No, I won't go with you. You don't have a choice." Vernon pulled her toward the door. "I have a carriage waiting. Don't make this difficult." As he dragged her forward, a new sensation gripped Abigail, not fear this time, but fury. Fury that this man still believed he owned her, that he would threaten not just her safety but her child's future. Fury that he would try to steal the happiness she had found with Jacob. With strength born of desperation, Abigail wrenched her arm free and shoved Vernon as hard as she could. Caught off guard, he stumbled back against the dresser. "I said no." Her voice was strong now, resonant with conviction. "You will never touch me again. You will never touch my child." Vernon's face darkened with rage. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything I gave me." Abigail laughed bitterly. Bruises, broken bones, terror, Those were your gifts, Vernon, and I don't want them anymore. He lunged for her again, but Abigail was ready. She grabbed the heavy ceramic water pitcher from the nightstand and swung it with all her might. It connected with Vernon's temple with a sickening crack, sending him crashing to the floor. For a moment, Abigail stood frozen, afraid she had killed him. But Vernon groaned, trying to push himself up. Blood trickled from a gash on his forehead, and his eyes were unfocused. Seizing her chance, Abigail ran from the bedroom and down the stairs, her heart pounding. She could hear Vernon cursing, his footsteps unsteady as he followed. The front door was her goal, but as she reached for it, a sharp pain knifed through her abdomen. Abigail gasped, doubling over. Not now, she thought desperately. Please, not now, but her body had other ideas. Another contraction gripped her, stronger than the first. Her water broke in a sudden gush, soaking her skirts and the floor beneath her. Vernon appeared at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of fury. "You're not going anywhere," he snarled, starting down toward her. Abigail fumbled with the door latch, her hands slippery with sweat. Another contraction hit, nearly bringing her to her knees. The door finally swung open, and she staggered onto the porch. "Help!" she screamed, praying someone would hear. "Somebody help me!" To her immense relief, she saw Deputy Wilson riding past. He reined in sharply at her cry, then spurred his horse forward when he saw her condition. "Mrs. Callahan." He dismounted in a hurry, reaching her just as Vernon appeared in the doorway. "Tom," Abigail gasped, clutching her belly. "The baby's coming. And she pointed at Vernon. The deputy's hand went to his gun as he placed himself between Abigail and Vernon. "Mr. Blackburn, I presume, you're trespassing on Sheriff Callahan's property." Vernon straightened his jacket, trying to regain his composure despite the blood on his face. "This is a private matter, Deputy. My wife needs medical attention." "She's not your wife," Tom said firmly, "and you're under arrest for breaking and entering and assault." Vernon's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, boy." Before Tom could respond, hoofbeats thundered down the street. Jacob galloped into view, his expression frantic. He leaped from his horse while it was still moving, rushing to Abigail's side. "Abigail, are you hurt?" His eyes took in her wet skirts, the pain contorting her face. "The baby! It's coming," she managed between clenched teeth. "Jacob, Vernon was here. He tried to take me." Jacob's head snapped up, his gaze locking on Vernon with lethal intent. For a moment, Abigail thought he might kill the man where he stood, but another contraction seized her, pulling a cry from her lips, and Jacob's focus returned to her. "Tom, get Dr. Hayes," he ordered. "Then come back and deal with Blackburn. I'm taking Abigail inside." "But sir," "Now, Deputy." Jacob lifted Abigail into his arms as gently as possible. "Hold on, sweetheart. I've got you." Vernon took a step forward. "That's my child, Callahan. You have no right." Jacob's voice was ice cold. "One more word, Blackburn, and deputy or no deputy, I will put a bullet in you. Is that clear?" Something in Jacob's expression must have convinced Vernon of his sincerity. He stepped back, his hands raising slightly. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow. Jacob didn't bother to respond, carrying Abigail back into the house and up the stairs to their bedroom. By the time he laid her on the bed, her face was pale with pain, her breathing coming in short gasps. "Jacob," she clutched his hand, "don't leave me." "Never," he promised, pushing damp hair from her forehead. "I'm right here." The next few hours were a blur of pain and fear for Abigail. Dr. Hayes arrived quickly, bringing his nurse, a motherly woman named Mrs. Peterson. Jacob stayed by Abigail's side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told her as the labor intensified. "You can do this, Abigail. I believe in you." Outside, they could hear raised voices, Vernon arguing with Tom, refusing to leave. But Abigail focused on Jacob's face, his steady presence anchoring her through the storm of bringing new life into the world. Finally, as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the bedroom, Dr. Hayes announced, "I can see the head." "One more push, Mrs. Callahan." With a cry that seemed torn from her very soul, Abigail gave a final push, and the room filled with the thin, indignant wail of a newborn. "A boy, Doctor," Hayes declared, lifting the squalling infant. "A fine, healthy boy." Tears streamed down Abigail's face as the doctor placed her son on her chest. Tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair, he was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Hello, little one," she whispered, her finger tracing his perfect features. "I've been waiting for you." Jacob stared at the baby in wonder, his own eyes damp. "He's perfect, Abigail, absolutely perfect." For a moment, they were suspended in a bubble of pure joy, the world outside their bedroom forgotten. But reality intruded all too soon with heavy footsteps on the stairs. Vernon appeared in the doorway, having apparently overpowered Tom, his eyes fixed on the baby with an expression of triumph. "My son," he said, stepping forward. "I knew it would be a boy." Dr. Hayes moved to block him. "Sir, this is highly inappropriate. The mother needs rest." Vernon shoved him aside. "That's my child. I have rights." Jacob rose from the bedside, his face thunderous. "Get out of my house, Blackburn." "Now, not without my son." Vernon reached for the baby, but Jacob caught his wrist in an iron grip. "Touch them, and it will be the last thing you ever do." The two men stood face to face, the tension crackling between them. Then from the bed came Abigail's clear voice. "Vernon." Both men turned. Abigail sat up straighter, cradling her son protectively. Gone was the fear that had defined her for so long. In its place was a calm, implacable resolve. "This is my son," she said. "Mine and Jacob's. You will never touch him, never see him, never be part of his life." Vernon sneered. "The courts will say otherwise. Blood is blood." "The courts will hear about how you beat me," Abigail continued, her voice gaining strength. "They'll hear from the doctor in Sacramento who treated my broken arm, from the neighbors who heard me screaming, from your own servants who saw what you did to me." Vernon's confidence faltered. "No one will believe you over me." "They already do," Jacob said. "Judge Porter has signed statements from 5 witnesses in Sacramento. People who were too afraid to speak up before, but who came forward when they heard you were trying to claim guardianship." Vernon's face paled. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Jacob reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a folded document. "This is a restraining order, issued yesterday by Judge Porter. You are legally prohibited from coming within 100 yards of Abigail or the child." Vernon snatched the paper, his eyes scanning it frantically. "This is absurd. I'll fight it. You'll lose," Jacob interrupted. "And if you continue to harass my wife or attempt to see this child against her wishes, I will personally ensure that everyone from Sacramento to San Francisco knows what kind of man Vernon Blackburn really is." His voice hardened. "How do you think your business associates will react to that?" Vernon's face contorted with rage, but beneath it was something Abigail had never seen before: uncertainty. For the first time, Vernon was facing an opponent he couldn't intimidate or buy off. "This isn't over," he said, but the words lacked conviction. "Yes, Vernon," Abigail said softly, looking down at her son. "It is over. It has been since the day I found the courage to leave." For a long moment Vernon stood there, his fists clenching and unclenching. Then, with a final venomous glare at Jacob, he turned and stalked out of the room. They listened to his heavy footsteps descending the stairs, the slam of the front door. Only when the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance did Abigail let out a shuddering breath. "Is he really gone?" she asked, her voice small. Jacob sat beside her, gently wrapping an arm around her and their son. "Yes, and if he knows what's good for him, he'll stay gone." Dr. Hayes cleared his throat. "I should examine the baby properly now, if you don't mind." As the doctor checked the newborn, Jacob pressed a kiss to Abigail's temple. "You were magnificent," he murmured, "both in giving birth and in standing up to Vernon." "I couldn't have done either without you," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "You gave me the strength to fight back." "No," Jacob shook his head. "That strength was always in you, I just helped you remember it." Dr. Hayes returned the baby, now wrapped snugly in a blanket. "He's perfect in every way. 8 pounds, good strong lungs. You should rest now, Mrs. Callahan, both of you." After the doctor left, with promises to return in the morning, Jacob and Abigail were finally alone with their son. The baby had settled against Abigail's breast, his tiny fingers curled around Jacob's much larger one. "What shall we name him?" Jacob asked, gazing at the infant with undisguised love. Abigail thought for a moment. "William, after my father, William Jacob Callahan." "It's perfect," Jacob agreed. "Welcome to the world, William." As the baby dozed in her arms, Abigail looked up at Jacob. "Do you think Vernon will come back?" Jacob's expression turned serious. "He might try, but the restraining order is real and so are the witness statements. If he wants to maintain his reputation in Sacramento society, he'll keep his distance. And if he doesn't, then we'll face him together," Jacob promised. "But I think Vernon Blackburn is smart enough to know when he's beaten, and today he was beaten not by me but by you." Abigail considered this, realizing it was true. For the first time in her marriage to Vernon, she had stood her ground without flinching. She had refused to be intimidated. And in doing so, she had broken his power over her forever. "We're going to be all right, aren't we?" she asked, looking down at William. Jacob's arm tightened around her shoulders. "More than all right. We're going to be happy." And for the first time, Abigail truly believed it. The days following William's birth were a blur of joy and exhaustion for the new parents. Jacob took time away from his duties as sheriff, leaving Tom Wilson in charge for a week while he helped Abigail adjust to motherhood. William proved to be a good-natured baby, with a strong appetite and lungs to match. His dark hair and eyes clearly came from Vernon, but as the days passed, Jacob and Abigail both noticed that his smile, which appeared early and often, was entirely his own. Vernon did not return to Stockton, though they heard through Judge Porter that his lawyer had made inquiries about visitation rights. The judge, true to his word, had informed the lawyer about the witness statements and restraining order, suggesting that Mr. Blackburn would be wise to accept the situation. A month after William's birth, on a crisp December morning with frost silvering the windows, Jacob and Abigail stood in the small church on Main Street once again. This time, they were there not for a hasty wedding of convenience, but for William's christening. The church was filled with well-wishers, Amanda, of course, as William's godmother, Dr. Hayes and his wife, Mrs. Winters from the hotel, and many of the townspeople who had come to respect and admire the young couple. As Reverend Miller blessed the baby, Abigail looked around at the community that had embraced her so completely. These people had given her more than shelter when she arrived in Stockton. They had given her a home. After the ceremony, they hosted a small celebration at their house. Amanda had outdone herself with the refreshments, and the home was filled with laughter and conversation. William was passed from arms to arms, admired and cooed over by everyone present. As the afternoon waned and guests began to depart, Abigail found Jacob standing by the window, watching the sunset with William asleep against his shoulder. The sight of them together, her husband and her son, filled her heart almost to bursting. She moved to stand beside him, slipping her arm around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob smiled down at her. "How lucky I am. 6 months ago, I was a confirmed bachelor married to my job. Now look at me." "Do you ever regret it?" Abigail asked. "Getting caught up in my troubles, taking on another man's child." Jacob shook his head firmly. "Not for a single moment. Meeting you, loving you, becoming William's father, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me." Abigail leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the baby sleep. "I used to think I'd never be happy again, that Vernon had taken that possibility away forever. And now," she smiled up at him, "now I know better. Happiness isn't something someone can take from you. It's something you build day by day with the people you love." Jacob shifted William to one arm so he could pull Abigail closer with the other. "I love you, Abigail Callahan. You and William are my whole world. And we love you," she replied, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "My protector, my husband, my home." As the last guest departed and twilight settled over Stockton, the little family stood together in their warm house, bound not by fear or obligation, but by love freely given and joyfully received. For Abigail, who had once whispered desperate promises to her unborn child on a dusty road into town, it was the fulfillment of a dream she had hardly dared to hope for: safety, love, and the chance to raise her son in a home where the only raised voices would be in laughter. And for Jacob, it was the family he had never expected to have: a brave, resilient wife who grew stronger every day, and a son who, though not of his blood, was entirely of his heart. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, and inside, in the circle of Jacob's arms, Abigail and William were home,